welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our review of the USMNT's win over Costa Rica via the medium of penalty shootout. Yes, Poch's side beat Los Ticos 4-3 on pens in this team's toughest test so far, with Matt Freese earning hero status with his bailout performance in the shootout with 3 penalty saves. It's about time someone who went to Harvard caught a break, in my opinion. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today is your friend, is my friend, the Taylor Rocco. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. Did he go to Harvard? I had no idea. Is Freeman Antonio Freeman's son? I had no idea. That got I think it's mandatory that be mentioned at least twice a broadcast every single time.
Yeah, but it's the 1 year at Harvard, right? He did the Rivers Cuomo like dip in and dip out situation, I think.
Yes, I think so. I think that's about right. Yes,
he did the tour anyway. No, Matt Freese, very very smart guy. Graham Ruffin, hello, how are you?
Hello, Ryan Bailey. I was watching a different feed, so I didn't get that commentary. What was the relevance of mentioning that he went to Harvard? Was there a row-off to decide this game?
It's legally obligated that anybody who went to Harvard either mention it or have it mentioned every single time they're in a conversation.
Was he wearing the Harvard hoodie under his US kit as well? I've learned that that's an obligation as well. Yeah.
Yeah, the goalkeeping trainers at the start of the game were the Winklevi, actually, Graham. So that's how we knew.
Oh, wow.
Nice reference for you there. All right. Plenty to be getting into with this USMNT review. The 2025 Gold Cup is getting to its hot area, shall we say, which is, it's a pretty hot area where I am, and I'm sure where Taylor Rockwell is as well. Taylor, how you feeling?
The majority of the United States is the hot area. Yeah, it's like 90 degrees already. It's lovely, balmy weather. I can't wait for Europeans to explode next summer. It's going to be awesome.
Well, speaking of that, Taylor, on our bonus feed, I believe, on our Patreon, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show, we're going to be talking about some of the weather delays and some of the hot weather we've seen in the US this summer, some of the stuff the European mind cannot comprehend. Yes, indeed. I'm sure it's not going to be a storyline at all when the big jamboree comes to the US next summer, because it is already. Graham, I saw it was headline news that the Charlotte game with Chelsea and Benfica took 3.5 days to complete. So there's going to be more of that.
Yeah, Todd Bowley wasn't particularly happy because he had to pay his players overtime when it stretches into the early hours. I've been there working in a bar. Once you get past midnight, you get double pay. So I presume that Cucurella was getting paid like 400 grand a week for that. So he was delighted. Chelsea players were absolutely delighted, but Enzo Maresca, not so much. Pep Guardiola, not so much. Everyone associated with English and European football, not so much. I called this at the start of the tournament when it happened for the first time in Orlando, that this is going to be a huge talking point next summer. This just doesn't happen in European soccer, and we're 12 months early on that because it's a huge talking point right now in the British media.
Yeah. Rather than talk about weather, which I guess we're saving for the Patreon, I will ask this. Do you all think Todd Bowley knows all of the Chelsea players by face? Can he recognize them? Or if I kind of turned up in line for my per diem, would he just hand me a per diem check and I could be on my way? Would he know that I don't play for Chelsea aside from physical appearance?
That's what happened with Jadon Sancho, I think, is he just turned up last season and they gave him a squad number. So there's hope for you, Taylor.
All right. Do you think that Bowley hands out the per diems to the team, Taylor? Just to clarify here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's how it works. And yes, right. It is per diem. They get $20 a day for food. Yep.
Nice. That ain't going nowhere in the US.
That's Manchester United.
No. 20 times 10,000, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. I imagine Bowley walking around, Reece James, and you're like, here, yep, here's your $20. Very good. Transaction complete. Excellent stuff. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show for our bonus content, by the way. Also, you get access to our Discord where all the cool kids are hanging out. But we've got plenty to talk about with the US team and the Gold Cup in this episode. Let's get to it and talk about that win over Costa Rica. Costa Rica, of course, taking the lead from the spot. Then Malik Tillman missing the penalty. Got a bit heated after that, didn't it? Then Diego Luna got the equaliser. Big old deflection, putting his shot on target. And then it was Max Arfsten putting the US in the lead after the break. The same Max Arfsten who gave up the penalty for the opener and who assisted Luna. So we'll get to him. Had a very interesting, productive...
That's a Max Arfsten hat-trick, I think, right there.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. He's a very handsome lad as well. It just kind of...
He is, actually.
Kind of clicked with me in this game. We'll get to that. Costa Rica then equalised with 20 to go. They hit the post. They hit the post, putting the US inches from going out, as Stu Holden said on the commentary. And then, of course, the penalty shootout. Very entertaining as it was, as one of the better shootouts in recent memory, I would say. Matt Freese saving 3 pens, as already established, including the boldest of moves, saving the one down the middle and not moving. Wonderful stuff. We'll get to that. Obviously, Keylor Navas had a very good shootout as well. But Damien Downs scoring the winner in the 6th round of penalties. Taylor, fair to say that this tournament has come to life at this point? I'm not saying it's the most amazing game, not the most amazing USMNT performance, but we had a tense atmosphere here. We had players who at the end looked like they were, emotionally engaged with this whole process. It looked like this one meant something.
Including Pochettino, right? Who turns and does the vamos right into the camera at the end of the shootout. That was an enjoyable moment. Yeah, for me at least, it is definitely kicked into life. Because the group stage, you want the U.S. to win, you want them to play well. But there's a feeling of like, okay, they're going to get some wins here. They should get out. Maybe there's going to be a little drama along the way. Last night I was really nervous, and I was genuinely like, please, 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 please. I did not want the team to go out at this point, not just for our coverage, but because I want them to go far. I want this team to do well. It felt like they were building a little bit of chemistry, so to go out in a shootout would have been a bummer. To go out in a shootout after having the better opportunities, not maybe taking some of them, having a missed penalty, it could have been a much more comprehensive win, I think. Not to say that it was then a poor performance, but the drama was there. The emotions were there. I was very, very nervous and very, very relieved. I celebrated loudly in a room by myself last night when they ended up advancing. So, yes, the drama has arrived, Brian Bailey.
Yeah, I don't know if this is because I found watching this team so boring these past few months, but I had a lot of fun watching this game. It would have been less fun had it finished with the US going out, and we would have had the whole post-mortem routine again, which has also become a little bit boring. And that thought crossed my mind as we were getting towards the end of regulation time. Do I have the juice for another one of these shows where we pick apart the bones of a disappointing US tournament? And so I'm glad that we have avoided that for the time being. But coming out of a shootout win, which, I don't think you could ever say was hugely convincing or anything like that, a 2-2 draw against Costa Rica is not... it's not prompting me to say that the US is going to win the World Cup next year, I'll put it that way. But I still feel pretty energised by what we saw last night, because from pretty much the moment Costa Rica take the early lead, it was a game where the US had to show their mettle in. And so my hope for this group is that this is a growing moment for them, for those players and for Poch. And look, I don't know how to quantify that exactly, because that's sort of based on vibes, but nonetheless I do think it's important. And we saw that galvanization at the end of the match with the sort of Pochettino celebration. To your point, Ryan, we saw players that were engaged in that moment, so the hope is that they're able to build on that in some way for the hopefully 2 more games of this tournament.
I would also be lying, 99% of my enthusiasm was the U.S. winning, getting through to the next round. There's a 1% sprinkling of Canada getting eliminated. Not because I have any beef with Canada, but because it led to Jesse Marsh being like, well, I didn't have any of my good guys, so it's not my fault. That was an enjoyable moment for me, who hasn't always enjoyed Jesse Marsh's comments and thoughts as Canadian national team manager.
Yeah, that was very much Ricky Gervais in the original Office saying, well, none of the good guys have turned up to the bar tonight, unfortunately. Jesse Marsh had that same energy. Graham, you mentioned this as a growth moment, which I think is quite an important thing to note, because for me, maybe excuse my ignorance, but this felt like the first time I've seen this team really get better together. And I think the team is getting better as the tournament continues. But this one, Costa Rica, they're no slouches. They were weak, and they had a few starters absent as well in this one. But they got through the groups very convincingly. This was a stern test for the US, and it's one that they, narrowly passed, but they passed it. And I think it's important to say that there is growth here, and I'm excited to see from the semi-finals onwards more growth.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reluctant to use this term because I think it's used so lazily a lot of the time, but winning mentality is a thing on some level, and moments like this help to build that. So I don't know, to pull us back a little bit, I don't know how much of this is going to influence what happens next summer, just because the group of players is going to be completely different. Maybe there'll be a bit of overlap with some of these players, but just looking at this tournament in isolation and the US trying to win a competition, win a trophy to set the tone for the next 12 months, I do think it was important. And I think my biggest macro thing for this tournament, we talk about the micro things being the sort of individual performances of players, which I'm sure we'll go into over the course of this episode. But the biggest macro thing that I wanted to see was fight and good spirit from this US team, because I'm sick of watching a meek and feeble USMNT. And while I don't think you could say, to repeat my point, last night was not outstanding in terms of the full performance, I do actually think the US were a little bit unfortunate to be taken to extra time. But you could never say it was meek, this performance. Throughout the full 90 minutes, from going down early, and yes, that's a self-inflicted mistake by Max Arfsten, so that's on the US. But throughout the 90 minutes, there was fight. It wasn't meek, and throughout the penalty shootout was they showed their mettle.
Taylor, we're obviously going to get into some individual performances from this game, but can we get into the specific performance of Mauricio Pochettino? There's been some comments about his game management for this one. I mean, obviously Brian White coming on for Big Pat late on and not being used in the subsequent penalty shootout was an
little odd.
Interesting one, right? But what do we make it? There were some changes from the Haiti game.
He didn't know that there wasn't any extra time. Like, that's really what happened here, isn't it?
Do you think that's it?
Sorry to jump in there, but
genuinely, do you think that's the case? Because maybe.
I think so. Like this is the first time this has happened, right? The Gold Cup. Not that Poch was probably watching previous iterations of the Gold Cup, but it's quite uncommon at this level to go straight to penalty kicks. So yeah, I think he told on himself with the Brian White substitution, bringing him on for 3 minutes, and then he doesn't take a PK like that. Yeah, that's a telltale.
Yeah, because I mean he was waiting for a good little bit of time by the fourth official, but even there, I don't think you're bringing somebody on in the 86th minute or whatever to then potentially hit that winner in the final 4 minutes plus added time. So it was an odd change. He did make some changes, as you said, Ryan, from the Haiti game, including going with more of kind of like a three-man straight-up midfield. He doesn't play Jack McGlynn, which is the thing we thought might happen. He doesn't play him out wide. Instead, that's where Sebastian Berhalter lined up. You have Tyler Adams and Luca De La Torre in the middle, with Tyler Adams being your sort of deepest player, sometimes dropping between the center backs, sometimes staying a little bit more advanced. Malik Tillman, more advanced of him, and then Diego Luna sort of drifting as he wanted to. And I thought it was a natural lineup, an intelligent lineup. What I think it also showed is that given the limitations of this squad, given how many players are missing, I still think that there are reverberations from when Pochettino changes the entire team from Turkey to Switzerland and just gets blitzed. I still feel like he's a little gun-shy to make changes and bring in quote-unquote reserve players or quote-unquote backups, because you don't have a change from the U.S. until the 78th minute when Damian Downs comes on for Luca De La Torre, who was fine, if unspectacular, in this game. And then you don't have any more changes until the 83rd minute when you get Jack McGlynn and John Tolkien coming on, and then Brian White there at the end. All of those felt like changes that maybe needed to happen 15 minutes or so before they actually did. From everything I have read from people in attendance, you could see the U.S. just not having the legs, not able to kind of physically compete for the last 20 minutes or so. And I think that's where if they had made some changes, if they'd been a bit more proactive, I think they could have killed this game off or maybe gotten another goal and finished comfortably after 90 minutes. Instead, I think there is a hesitancy to change things up, and in that hesitation, I think Costa Rica were able to gain momentum, gain a little bit more control, and find a way back into this game. So that would be my only, I think, real knock of Pochettino's game management, aside from what I read, Tyler Adams was meant to be the designated penalty taker. Malik Tillman wins the penalty, decides he wants to take it, has never taken a penalty at senior level, misses this one, does make his in the shootout. And it's really the only negative thing I have to say about Malik Tillman from this performance is that he misses that penalty. So maybe if you're Pochettino, you force the issue and say we've made this decision. But I also think when you have a player who's been in very good form winning the penalty, it's kind of tough to tell him, no, you're not taking it. So I'm not really knocking Pochettino for that one, just mentioning it because it seems like a thing that they had agreed upon prior to kickoff. So overall, a B, I would say, from Pochettino. The substitutions and the lack of control in those final 20 minutes was more of a concern than I wanted it to be.
Yeah, I mark him down for the subs or the lack of subs, Taylor. Yeah. That genuinely does feel, I'm not kidding, it feels like he was sort of preparing for extra time and didn't really know it was going to a shootout. But I even think just in terms of the game state, I thought up until the second Costa Rica goal, the US had quite comprehensively been the stronger team. And actually, on the whole, I kind of think the US were a bit unfortunate to be taken to penalties in the first place, because Costa Rica, they score with 2 of their first 3 shots inside the box, and the other shot was a nothing chance from out by, I'm just looking at the FOTMob shot map now. It's out. It's a nothing chance. It's out by the corner of the area. So I never felt like the US were under a lot of pressure up until that moment. It wasn't like Costa Rica were carrying a lot of threat on the break. Now, the 2 Costa Rica goals, I think, are a consequence of, once again, poor defending inside the box by the US. Obviously, the Arfsten one is an absolute calamity. Even the second goal, Arfsten and De La Torre. Like, Arfsten's getting a lot of heat, but De La Torre's there as well. Like, for is it Mora who squeezes between the two of them is unacceptable in that moment. And then even from the save, the US are so static inside the box, and Alonso Martinez wasn't and finishes. And I've seen that moment from the US so many times over the last 12 months. So again, they kind of have themselves to blame. But after that moment, the game became more stretched and the game state changed. And so even from that point of view, that was the time for Pochettino to really change things. And while I think the setup worked relatively well, I think we saw some sequences like for the second US goal where Poch was surely pleased with how that system facilitated that attack, where you've got Agyemang holding it up, you've got Tillman taking the ball into space, you then got Arfsten bursting down the left side and into the box to finish. The system is kind of designed to do that. There were also some other times against a low block when I thought it might have been useful to have someone like McGlynn on the field instead of having that sort of third number 8 in central midfield. So I thought there were positives and negatives from the way that Pochettino set the team up.
Yeah, I think if you ask Spurs and Chelsea fans, they'll probably tell you he's got a bit of a rep for making subs a bit too late and perhaps not the best ones either, but maybe that's overly critical at this point.
Yeah, it's a confusing thing with him because I think you're totally right, Ryan. At the same time, I remember like when they made that Champions League run, he was like we were really impressed by his ability to change things really early in the game. Like he was making tactical and formational changes in like the 25th minute and the 30th minute, and I think he even made a substitution or two before halftime in certain games. And it felt like, I think that maybe that's where I'm coming from with my idea that like Pochettino can be a very proactive in-game manager, and then at the same time I think can be hesitant to make those changes, to make those substitutions. That has existed as club level, as you said, but it continues to exist with the USMNT and is a thing that could very much come back to bite them in games where they are playing opposition that is more capable of springing surprises and springing attacks on you. Costa Rica, I thought were good in this game. I thought they were largely sort of uninspiring in their attack until maybe after they equalized, and then it did feel like they could kind of potentially score or create opportunities with very little effort, or largely maybe through the effort of Mora dribbling down the right wing and U.S. players, I guess, just deciding not to tackle. I don't really know what the plan was there or why they consistently could not shut him down, but he got by Arfsten on more than one occasion, including in the lead-up to that goal. It happens with De La Torre. It happens with Diego Luna, who I think was slow to track back on one occasion. That was a bit of a concern for me as the game played out.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to dig into some of the individual performances and much more. Stick around. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our USMNT Costa Rica review. Taylor, is the starting goalkeeper debate, has it been settled? Is it Matt Freese's jersey to lose now after this performance?
Okay. I was very positive about this game. I feel like I have been largely negative. I'm going to give you like my hottest of hot takes, which is that I am not one of those people who is like, that's it, it's settled, we know for sure. I still think it's a pretty open question. He is excellent in the shootout, don't get me wrong. However, maybe I'm being unfair. Like, could he have done better on the goal for Costa Rica, the equalizer? Like, it goes kind of right at him, and I think he spills it right back into the run of play. I do wonder if another goalkeeper parries that wide or is able to take it cleanly. And that is maybe being overly critical, but it did stand out to me in that sequence. He is certainly not the only one to blame, but I think there's a little responsibility on him. But I felt like his distribution was very panicky. A lot of the times it's just sort of rushing kicks to get clear. I think some of that was the surface. It felt like the ball held up at times and bobbled at times, and so he was just really focused on not making the mistake he made against Haiti. But as a result, I felt like his distribution tended to be sort of wide, but usually into like the half spaces and low, so that oftentimes it was either a contested ball or it was a ball straight to Costa Rica or is out for a throw-in. And I don't feel like his distribution, his foot skills slowed things down and allowed the U.S. to just kind of control the tempo, control the speed of play a little bit. It felt like it was kind of rushed on a consistent basis. That said, I don't remember any other obvious moments from his game. He doesn't come for crosses and flap at them. He doesn't get knocked off the ball easily, and that was a thing that Costa Rica was trying to do. They were trying to set up numbers in the box on set pieces to kind of limit him, crowd him out, make sure he couldn't get to the ball, and on a number of occasions, he takes it cleanly. So credit to him for that. Massive credit to him for the shootout, where he goes the right way, I believe, all but one time, so 5 of 6 times. He makes the 3 saves, and I think not much he could have done for the penalty in regulation, even if he gets a hand to it, and got a hand to a number of the penalties he wasn't able to keep out. So I think all of that was excellent, but I still have those questions about his distribution and some of those reflexes in the moment that I think he definitely helped his stock quite a bit, but I'm definitely not a person who's like, that's it, this is the game, it was decided, it's all over.
Yeah, I'm not going back on what I said in the last episode, which was no matter who starts for the US in that opening game of the World Cup next year, I'm not going to feel great about it. And so last night, as good as it was for Matt Freese, hasn't changed that opinion. I don't feel like that we've found the next Tim Howard or anything like that. At the same time, last night, I think it's quite clear, and Taylor, I'm sure you'd agree with this, last night was the most important match of Freese's national team career so far. Granted, he's not played a lot of games, but he has come off the back of a game where he makes a blunder, he needs to make a response in this game, so to be the guy who effectively gets the US over the line in a knockout match. He said after the game that, quote, penalties are his thing. If that's true, and look, I sort of believe him after this shootout, where, as you say, Taylor, he was close to pretty much everything and made 3 saves, and the one during the match he gets a hand to as well. If that's true, and penalties are his thing, that's a differentiator for him in this pool. That could be important at World Cup. That could be enough to swing the starting spot in his direction, particularly if Matt Turner, I mean, Lyon are being relegated to the second tier of French football now. So even as things look to be getting better for Matt Turner, maybe they're not getting better at all. So it's all up in the air, and that position is going to be decided by the slimmest of margins, and last night might prove to be that slim margin that gets him the spot.
And like, as a fan base, I think people are justified in being really excited. There haven't been a lot of players in a lot of positions that have made us feel, especially in this group, that have made us feel like that could be the guy. We could be onto something here. And I think any moments of genuine enthusiasm and optimism are worth having and are valuable. I think it's just that on the heels of that howler against Haiti, and then I think some of his distribution in this game, it's just hard for me to be like, yep, that's it, game over. And I feel like so often as a fan base, we do that with players. We decide, here's an immensely good performance. Like, now it's done and dusted. We know for sure this is the guy. And then he has a bad performance the next time, and it swings back in the other direction. And I don't know if that's what will happen for Matt Freese. I agree with you, Graham. I think this was the biggest game of his national team career, and one that certainly left him feeling confident, as his celebrations showed time and time again. Now I think it's about what does he do next, and do we see more of that confidence now that he's maybe shaken off some of those nerves? Is he better on the ball? Is he as commanding in the air as he was? Is he a vocal leader for this team? I think if he continues to grow and continues to kind of look like a solid, very confident goalkeeper, very confident option between the sticks, I feel more confident in him as a starter. But I'm not yet ready to say he is definitely the number one. Matt Turner has lost the gig, especially because all of the coverage over here at least has been that Pochettino basically told Turner that he was the starter, but he wanted to see what other options could give him. I don't know if that was fully what was said. I don't know if that is fully even the case at this point, but I still think it is a more open contest than some might expect or want it to be.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. So Graham, you'll probably agree, when you are in a World Cup cycle, when you're in the cycle of any international team, it's important to kind of forge an identity, and there are key players who do that. And in the Poch era, there are certain players who, to me, feel like they are kind of forging the backbone of that identity, sort of standout players. I'd argue it's Luna and Tillman who are the ones who sort of making themselves a key part of that identity. So, first part, do you agree with that? Second part, is it an issue that possibly both of them might not be involved when the big show comes around?
The big show meaning next summer at the World Cup?
Yeah, rather than the Gold Cup semi-finals, yeah.
Well, see, the thing is, I think the way that both of those players are trending, they probably will be involved next summer. I came into this tournament thinking Diego Luna, if I had to place a bet, probably starts for the US at the World Cup next year. Now, he hasn't had as brilliant a tournament as I was kind of expecting that he would. I thought last night was a return to form for Diego Luna. It was probably the best game that he's played at this tournament so far. Malik Tillman is raising all sorts of questions about his place in this national team. Now, I know that Joe is a Malik Tillman believer. I know that because he messaged us during the game to tell us. Incidentally, within about 2 minutes of that message, Tillman had missed a penalty. So let's hope that he hasn't cursed him like he cursed Gio Reyna. But he was certainly very influential throughout this game. Lots of touches of the ball, picking up pockets of space off the forward line, taking opponents on. There were a few moments, when he just decided to take on like the entire Costa Rica team. Some of his dribbling was brilliant. In terms of his actual output, though, I thought it was a bit of a mixed bag. Obviously, there's the missed penalty in there, and there were times when I thought he could have like released the ball a little bit quicker. And I still feel like there's another level for him to get to in front of goal. Having said that, he misses the penalty. He wins the penalty with that surge to the byline. It was one of the first moments in the game where we really saw that incision from the US. Also, his assist for the second goal was excellent. And similar to the Haiti game, it felt like he was the biggest, most consistent threat in the final third, even if the final product was missing a lot of the time. But just to take it back to the two of those players, Ryan, to answer your question, I think that's one of the biggest kind of takeaways from this game and from the 4 games that we've seen so far is that those two players are creative mainstays for Poch. When he made changes for this game, it was McGlynn who came out. We've seen Poch change his left backs at this tournament as well, which is a key source of creativity in this team. We've seen him use Damien Downs alongside Agyemang as a front two coming off the bench. We've seen him chop and change the midfield. Luna and Tillman he hasn't touched. They start every game, and those are the players that he is building around at this tournament. It's about getting them into good areas and playing through them and off them.
Couple questions, comments based off what Graham's just said. Graham, number one, if you have Luna as a starter and Pulisic is fit, so do you have Luna on the left, Pulisic on the right? Do you switch them?
I would have Luna in the middle, Weah on the right, Pulisic on the left. Yeah.
And then
does that make sense?
Is it Adams, McKinney, and
So
aren't you then dropping Tillman then?
At this moment, I prefer Luna to Tillman. I think Joe and I maybe disagree on that. I love Diego Luna. He's one of my favourite players to watch at the moment, and I just think he sets the tone in terms of intensity. Even the games that he doesn't, like in terms of the eye test, have a great influence in. You look at his numbers, he's still up there for like passes in at the final third and dribbles and shots, and so I personally think his floor is higher than Malik Tillman. When Tillman drops out of games, he drops out of games like entirely. So yeah, right now I would put Luna ahead of Tillman, but I think there's maybe a bit of disagreement on that.
He doesn't rattle, Luna. That's the thing I've noticed about him. Like he seems very unemotional. He seems very nonplussed, even if I think I'm using that word incorrectly. He always just seems pretty stoic, pretty calm. Even when he gets his nose broken, he continues to play. I think the only bout of extreme emotion we saw was after he scored in this game, and then you get the vamos and you get the big time celebration. But otherwise, he's just pretty unflappable, I feel like, and I really enjoy that about him. I think he brings a calmness and a determination and a bit of grit to this team, and I think Tillman definitely did as well in this game. He's the most fouled player. I think the foul that led to the penalty probably could have and should have been a red card, but it's CONCACAF, so yellow card it is, because I think the argument would be it wasn't dog so because it was just like a violent tackle, right? And a violent tackle can be punished with a red and the penalty can still be given. But in this case, that's not the case. And then I think so often in this game, he just gets a lot of afters, Tillman. He gets a lot of little kicks after the ball is gone. When he's on the ground after being knocked over, he gets another little knock. He gets another little nudge. And some of that can just be incidental or accidental. At a certain point when it accumulates, it feels like maybe there's a deliberate effort to kind of knock him around and knock him out of the game. And Costa Rica was not able to do that. And that leads to the penalty that's missed. It leads to a number of opportunities for the United States. And for that go-ahead goal by Max Arfsten, it is Tillman playing in that final ball. It's also Tillman, as we've seen a number of times in this tournament, receiving between the lines from Chris Richards. Chris Richards does a really good job in that goal of carrying the ball forward just a little bit to pull some Costa Rican defenders out and open up just a few little gaps. And it looks for all the world like the opening that was there for Tillman to receive has closed. But because Richards holds that ball just a little bit longer, he's able to thread the needle, and then Tillman's able to play forward into Agyemang, and away they go. And so even there, we're seeing some patterns, and we're seeing how often it's Richards to Tillman, it's Ream to Tillman. They're looking into his feet, or they're looking to find him so that he can then pull strings and conduct. And I think we've seen a player who's very much growing into this tournament. My knock, I guess because I have a knock on every single player, it feels like I'm not trying to be negative. But my knock has long been with him. Like, I want to see him have a 10 out of 10 performance. I want to see him finish that goal when you really need him to. And that goes back to like one of the first games I remember watching from him at PSV, where he has an open shot from the top of the box and he puts it wide of frame. And you just at the very least want that on frame. You want it on target. You want it to lead to something. And since then, I feel like there's always a moment in every game from him where there is a clear goal scoring opportunity or a clear ball for an assist or just some moment that could push him to that next level. And the penalty, I think, was a great example of that, where I just felt like he wanted it. He steps up. He asks to take it. Luna's holding the ball. As I said, Adams, I think, was the designated taker. But it's Tillman who takes it, but never really looked that confident. And I think sort of like he tries to go across his body, which is always risky in a penalty, and I think just overhits it a little bit. And I wish for all the world that he had finished that. I was so nervous that he was going to miss his in the shootout, and he doesn't. So maybe that's the moment that elevates him past that. But like I think there's still just those little limitations to both Tillman's game and Luna's game, which I think is a fair thing to feel for both of us or all three of us after this tournament. That like their stock has gone up considerably. I think they've put themselves into the conversation, at the very least, to be in the World Cup squad, potentially to be starters. But I think also we would be naive to say that that's it. Like they've nailed it. These performances have been rock solid. There's always going to be deficiencies, and I think what we then want to see is improvement on those performances. And I think both of them have improved as the tournament has gone on.
Tillman hit that post twice. I don't know if you guys saw this, but after the Luna goal, he does that thing. You know how players, the ball comes out and he tries to like smash it into the back of the net. He smashed the same post, which I saw people in Blue Sky pointing out. So yeah, him and that post had a relationship during this game.
Oh wow. Graham, how about Max Arfsten, stupid sexy Max Arfsten? Obviously the goal and the assist, but also, as we've established, a bit of a nightmare in terms of decision making for the penalty as well. What do we make of his performance and his sort of his prospects going forward?
Yeah, probably the starkest illustration that we've had so far of Arfsten's strengths and also his weaknesses. I mean, I think we've got a pretty clear picture of what he is as a player at this point. Scores a really nice goal, gives away a really bad penalty. That's pretty much his national team career so far in a nutshell. And considering the role he plays for Columbus, where, as has been covered on this show and many other places throughout this tournament, this is not the position that he plays for Columbus. He's a bit of fish out of water for this team. But considering the position that he plays, I kind of wonder if he'd be better suited to just being an out-and-out winger.
Yes.
Because there's so much about Max Arfsten that I like. And that's what's frustrating about the narrative that's built around him during this tournament. And that narrative is fair. I'm not rallying against that. But I like that he is press resistant. He looks smooth when he gets into good areas like he did for the goal. I like that he's got a little bit of chaos factor as well, which we didn't see so much in this match, but we've seen it in previous performances where he will end up on the penalty spot inside the box. And that's a bit of the Wilfred Nonce ball coming out in him. So there's things to like about Max Arfsten. Clearly, defending is not his thing. So if he is playing wing back for Columbus, obviously that role doesn't exist in this team, so you have to move him forward or backwards, right? Considering his skill set, would it not make more sense to move him forwards rather than backwards? So I don't know if we're ever going to see Max Arfsten as a left winger for the US, just because there's a certain guy called Christian Pulisic and Diego Luna's doing quite well in that position. There are other options that are more proven. But it did enter my mind watching this game where he's not a bad player. He's just being asked to do things that he is bad at, if I can make that differentiation.
I think you've laid it out perfectly there, because I am also of the opinion that maybe against Guatemala, you move him further forward. Maybe you move him to where Berhalter was. You move Berhalter to where De La Torre was. Maybe you move Luna over or move Tillman over. But if you move Arfsten forward and you put Tolkien in as your left back, like we've talked about Tolkien being the better defensive option, and maybe that allows him to be the left back who kind of stays home or becomes the left center back, and maybe Freeman can then be more aggressive in his attacking approach. But the idea with this team is to build a starting 11 and a squad that makes sense so that you have a foundation, and then you can bring in the perceived starters, the perceived kind of superior players who are either at the Club World Cup or are injured or are taking the summer off, and then they can come in and start, but you have capable deputies, players who've proven that they can respond to the challenge. Is Arfsten ever going to start ahead of Christian Pulisic? No. Is he going to start ahead of Tim Weah? No. Is he going to start ahead of Diego Luna or Malik Tillman? Probably not. And so you could do that. It just feels like then you're ultimately taking away from what could be a learning experience. So what I guess we then want to see is, can Max Arfsten defend better as the tournament goes on? Because that is the big knock. And the penalty is, it's bad. It's he fails to clear it, or he clears it into a player, and then in the scramble to try, or he can't block it cleanly. He blocks it. That's what it is, right? He blocks it, but then there's the kind of the ball is bouncing. He tries to make the play and gets the player instead. And we see that on occasion where the player doesn't realize that the opponent is there. They go to clear. The opponent gets the ball first, so the player gets the opponent. I'm being a little bit generous because I think Arfsten just kicks the Costa Rican player. Down he goes. Penalty. However, the second goal is the one that I have a bigger issue with, because he is just a straight-up cone for that one. And De La Torre is there as well, and maybe it's diffusion of responsibility. But it felt for all the world like the briefing for Arfsten defensively had been, as long as you don't let them attack centrally, it's okay. And so oftentimes as the game went on, he gets beaten, but it's getting beaten down the line where there then has to be a kind of cross at speed from a tighter angle, and it's going to be a difficult ball to hit. I still don't love how easily they were able to get by him, more especially. But in the goal, it's him just giving up the space centrally and allowing a player to go in on goal when there are two defenders there. And De La Torre shares responsibility, but those moments against better opposition will destroy you. And so Arfsten, for all he offers from an attacking standpoint, I just can't get over those defensive deficiencies. So it's another one where I saw the positives. I saw an improvement from him, especially in attacking output. I still have those concerns about the defensive side of things, and I wonder what happens in the semifinal, because I haven't loved what we've seen from John Tolkien so far. We talked about him dribbling out of bounds in that final group stage game. He comes in and misses his penalty here. I doubt that informs kind of the defensive question, but I assume it will be Max Arfsten as your left back for the next game. I still have some concerns about what that could present for the U.S. defensively.
Okay. Taylor, any other players we want to spotlight from this performance? How about Pat Agyemang, by the way? I'd say generally this team had it was a stock up game rather than a stock down game for most players. I'm not sure I can say the same for Pat Agyemang in this game necessarily. And I thought it was interesting that as someone who's obviously a trusted lieutenant of Mauricio Pochettino wasn't trusted to potentially be involved in the shootout.
Why? Pausing on that for a moment, why do you feel like it wasn't a stock-up game for him? What did you see that you didn't like, or what did you not see that you would have liked?
Goals? I mean, that would be a good start.
That would help.
That would help.
I'm sort of conflicted, generally positive, but I think with Agyemang, it sounds so harsh, but I can't remember a forward running in the wrong direction more often than him. So often there is a through ball and he is running in the opposite way where the ball is played. And sometimes that can be the player playing the ball just gets it wrong or doesn't see what the run is going to be or bites on the feint and not on and doesn't see that the feint is leading to a change of direction. But Agyemang so often is running and then looks around oh, you passed the ball? My bad. And so there are those moments where I scratch my head and say is that good? Should that be happening as often as it is? But then at the same time, he was a menace with his hold-up play. He kept kind of being an option. He was always the option when Freeman needed to dump it long down the channel, or when Richards needed to do the same, or when Ream wanted to hit a diagonal. He was a willing runner. He was a capable runner, and his physicality caused problems for Costa Rica. He drew fouls. He held up well. He interplayed well with the kind of midfielders coming in behind him, Tillman especially. And so I thought all of that was good. I thought his running was so strong that I think he is gassed by the time he is brought out. And you could see it when that change is made and why Brian White, I think, is there as relatively early as he was and then is just waiting in the wings. Is because Agyemang is trying to defend but then can't be the kind of outlet for any sort of cleared ball and is just gassed by maybe the 75th minute. And I think that's where that change should have happened sooner. So I don't knock him for that. I truly don't even really knock him for not scoring. I think he has opportunities. I think if there's a little more sharpness, maybe he puts one of those in the back of the net. Maybe he puts a couple more on frame. But it's just those runs and those moments that look like pure confusion and pure lack of communication that have me continuing to scratch my head about Pat Agyemang.
He is such a confusing player. And I think there's consistently more discourse around Agyemang after every national team match at the moment than any other US player. I did a post on Blue Sky of asking our followers for 3 takeaways after the game last night. I think Agyemang was the player who came up more than, maybe after Matt Freese was the player who came up more than anyone else. And I think I've sort of protected myself from that discourse and just the general confusion around Pat Agyemang by just saying well, that's the player that he is, but I can't deny that he is confusing, because I agree with when people highlight his deficiencies and his weaknesses and his bad touch and his bad runs. I agree with all those things, but then he tends to produce a moment in a game which is the game breaker. And in the last 2 games, people say, his hold-up play has to improve. It's his hold-up play that creates the situation for the second goal in this game. And then in the last game against against Haiti, he scores that in-behind goal where he was really composed with his finish, which are also 2 other things people justifiably say he has to improve: the timing of his runs and his composure in front of goal. So I think it's only fair that we recognise those things as improvements, while also recognising that he's not quite put it all together in terms of a 90-minute performance for this team.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's fair enough. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the shootout. We're going to talk about much more, our key takeaways, and we're going to look ahead against to that semi-final against Guatemala. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our USMNT Gold Cup Spesh. We had a lovely old penalty shootout, didn't we? Taylor Rockwell, did you do a lovely diagram for the good folks? And did you enjoy this shootout?
I did. I was terrified going into this shootout. It's Keylor Navas, man. He's the best goalkeeper in CONCACAF. One of the best players ever produced by CONCACAF, if not the best player ever produced in CONCACAF. He says uncomfortably, but also somewhat confidently. He's exceptional. He's a world-class goalkeeper and has been for so long. And going up against this U.S. team where we don't have... we talked about this before we started recording. There isn't a single player in this team that if you put in the penalty spot, I think, yep, that person is definitely putting this in the back of the net. Every single one I have some concerns about. I was very nervous about with every single take. And I thought for all the world, with penalties being a little bit of a crapshoot, you never know how it's going to go. With Matt Freese having plenty of experience, but certainly not at this kind of level in terms of profile, I thought this was Costa Rica's penalty shootout to lose. And that they did speaks volumes about the U.S. takers. It speaks volumes about Matt Freese and about his preparation because, as I said, he goes correctly 5 of 6 times. The only one that gets him is the Martinez penalty in the very beginning where he just puts it right down the middle, passes it right down the middle. Freese dives for that one. But that aside, I think he gets a hand to almost every single one, if not every single one. He stands solid for the Calvo save, and then
which
has
is
a full stretch
that
save
is
for
such
Rojas.
a sorry to jump in, Taylor, but the Calvo save is such what would the kids say? A baller move. That's how I would describe it, and it's because it's Francisco Calvo as well, who's already scored, and we all know what he's like, and he just totally calls him out. He doesn't just save it; he beats it away with his fists. It was an incredible moment in the game.
And then I think runs out to celebrate and doesn't realize that he is right next to Calvo. And you see a moment of do I celebrate in his face or do I kind of meekly turn and celebrate the other way? And I think he kind of split the difference between the two. So I thought Freese was exceptional in the shootout. Keylor Navas was pretty good himself, though. He makes the one save, then there's the Berhalter miss, but he went correctly 5 of 6 times. The only one Navas goes the wrong way on is the Downs winner at the very end. Otherwise, there are some perfection penalties, otherwise they're getting saved. The Freeman one especially, the fourth kick for the U.S., he was unreadable in the run-up. Berhalter I thought was going to miss. Berhalter looked nervous and looked like he was trying to kind of psych himself up and calm himself down simultaneously. Freeman just looked unreadable. He had a poker face on, and then he just hits it perfectly. Navas goes the right way, guesses the right direction, is there, and if it's not 100% perfectly struck, if it's 95, that one's getting saved. So it's a credit to Navas, it's a credit to the U.S. takers, and I think for Berhalter, who I think otherwise had a good game, it's a good reminder of why, unless you are going for a disguised penalty, like we saw with Tyler Adams with the kind of stutter delay, and then you see where the goalkeeper's going, unless you're going with that, pick your spot and hit it and don't look again. Because you can see as he is running up, he looks up at the goalkeeper really quickly and I think sees Navas cheating in the direction that he is going to hit the ball, Berhalter, and so he adjusts. And I think maybe he doesn't even mean to, but I think psychologically, if you see the goalkeeper going there, you're going to think, oh, I've got to hit it a little bit higher. I've got to make sure this is in the back of the net in the top corner. And in so doing, he hits it over. So that's why you don't look at the goalkeeper when you are going for the smashed approach. Just pick your spot and hit it as hard as you can and hope for the best, unless you're going to try to be all sneaky and disguised. And I always worry about the sneaky and disguised, though it tended to work out in this shootout for the U.S.
Yeah, the immediate shot to Daddy Berhalter and family in the stand after Sebastian Skaida's penalty was evil. That was diabolical, man. You can see in Greg's face that he is so done with this team. I agree, Taylor, on the Freeman penalty. I think he does three things that make it unreadable. He starts his run completely straight on, so he doesn't come from an angle. He does obviously the stutter step where he actually, I think, only takes like one step before striking the ball. Somehow is able to get enough power in it to then find the top corner. But if you look at like the orientation of his foot, most of the time, a player will like curl their foot around the ball. It gives away which direction they're going to go. He hits it like entirely flat. So even as late as him hitting the ball, there's no indication of which side that's going to, which the technical ability to do that is just incredible. And it makes me a little bit sad that we haven't seen Freeman actually on the pitch in regulation time, not in a shootout. He hasn't really been given much of an opportunity to show that technical ability because of the role that he's playing for this team. But yeah, that was the best penalty of the bunch.
Yeah.
I thought he otherwise had a fairly uninspiring game as well. I feel like he made some very unforced errors and some kind of rough mistakes that show his roughness as a player. Still excited about him going forward, but
yeah, he almost cost the US the game with the Alonso Martinez turnover in the edge of the box, which the US are a centimetre away from going out of this whole tournament because of that.
Yeah, and even there, for people who didn't see, it's like it's a clearance down the line that's blocked, right? And then from there, like, okay, fine. Like, that's not great. But then to basically give the inside track to the attacker and not really close down and not really make life difficult for him, that is more unforgivable for me. If you're going to make a mistake, you've got to do everything you can to not overcommit and concede a penalty, but also to put the attacker off to slow the move down to let everybody get back into shape. So not a great sequence of events for him there. Much better on that penalty. And again, to drive it home, you're absolutely right, Graham, about all of that disguise. And if it had worked such that Navas went the wrong way, then, great, clever disguise. But that Navas still goes the right way. And even with all of that slowness of approach and disguise and the way he takes it, it's still a really well-taken, well-struck penalty. Credit to him for that one. Credit to John Tolkien for going back and pointing at the spot and being like, I love when takers do that when there's a miss. And then they're like, well, something clearly went wrong with the pitch. I don't know what it was. Is there a gopher down there? I don't know what could have happened.
Ironically, not flat enough. The pitch for John Tolkien.
Nice.
Man, I'll say, as much as I love Tyler Adams as well, him stepping up, I don't think of, we know he can, rope a ball into the back of the net. We've seen him do that on occasion. Still don't think of him as the most consistent goal scorer and that he was the lead-off taker for the U.S. Did not fill me with optimism. I really, as the shootout went on, I was just like, oh, man, this is how it's going to end. It's going to, the lack of squad depth and attacking depth is going to come back to haunt this team. Here we go. And yet, for the most part, I think all the penalties were really well taken.
Yeah. Adams' reaction to... He takes the first one, right, Taylor? Mm-hmm. Yeah. His reaction to scoring that penalty is really weird because he's completely deadpan. And Pochettino, you can see, trying to, I was a bit worried going into this shootout because even before the shootout, I don't know if you noticed this, but in the sort of huddle... Yeah. It just seemed very, particularly in contrast to Costa Rica, who I think it's Calvo, the captain, or whoever it was, is in the middle of the huddle, and it's all very orchestrated. Whereas the US were this ragtag bunch, and I think it's Tillman kind of gets pushed. He's sitting on the bench having a drink. He gets pushed into the middle, and then they're about to do the little team talk, and then Freese isn't there, and they have to wait for him. And look, I don't know if these things matter. The fact that the US end up winning the shootout tells me that it doesn't. But yeah, I was nervous. The vibes were low-key to start this shootout, and thankfully, as it went on, it kind of ramped up.
I have that in my notes, that Costa Rica's huddle was up for it. I think they had the mic right there and the camera right there just so you could hear how emphatic they were, how kind of passionate they were going to take those. And then, Graham, by contrast, the U.S. was like, oh, it's penalty? I think maybe they were still adjusting from it being penalties and not extra time. Maybe that explains it again.
As if you wouldn't run through a wall for Miguel Herrera, Taylor. I will say, for Matt Freese in his performance in the penalty shootout, he gave the quotes after the game saying, I actually studied penalties on the flight over to Minnesota. And it's been sort of framed as like, oh, college boy, Harvard guy, did some studying before this game. But like, surely in a knockout game, isn't that the absolute minimum expectation that you do some studying for penalties?
I think all goalkeepers do that.
Surely,
certainly
right?
now.
Yeah, they have to. That was not one. I thought.
I mean, if anything, maybe that's an understatement as to how much preparation went into that. Because to go the right way so consistently, I think maybe shows that there was a lot of tape being ground, of tape being watched. I did love Martinez for the first Costa Rican penalty, puts it right down the middle and does the wink at Freese right before he takes it. That was some poise. That was some confidence in that one. And that, again, did not make me feel optimistic about, like, when you have a take or step up, wink, and then bury it, and then it's Tyler Adams next. Again, I love Tyler Adams, but I was feeling very nervous at that point.
Ryan, is the implication, or is what's implied by like him studying is because he's a Harvard graduate, somehow he's got some other, is it like Zuckerberg at Harvard? Is it set to like a Nine Inch Nails soundtrack and like, he's seen things clearer than anyone else, man. I don't know, is that what was implied?
This nerd knows stuff. Call it the Costa Rica. It's smoother. Anyway, let's talk about some of our key takeaways from this game. Graham, I believe you solicited some takes from Blue Sky. Ian Rammond said his first take was, we need wingers. Second take, still struggling to close out big games, and Pat ain't doing it for me. Some takes from Andrew Johnson, Max for attacking midfielder. Berhalter is better than that missed PK, and the US should play a 3-4-2-1 with Luna on top because he's better than our striker pool. Graham, your thoughts on some of those and perhaps your own key takeaways from this performance?
Yeah, see, I told you, the discourse around Big Pat is just non-stop. And any time I listen to like another show or read an article, it always seems to be Agyemang at the top. So he's a bit of a lightning rod of opinion. I will defend Agyemang. I think
he's the closest to the lightning of anybody in this team. Maybe Freese. Freese is 6'4". I forget how tall Big Pat is, but those two are the ones who are getting the lightning.
Who jumps
first,
higher?
for sure.
They needed him in Charlotte or Orlando over for the Club World Cup to conduct to save everyone. But I'll defend Big Pat to a certain extent while acknowledging his weaknesses. I think I've already kind of given you one of my big takeaways, Ryan, which is Tillman and Luna are like mainstays in this team. And I think we knew that heading into this game, but just because Poch changed things with McGlynn and didn't touch the two of those, I think that's a big takeaway. And then with Matt Freese, I'm not willing to say everything is fine, but how quickly things change from one game to the next, because I think it's entirely fair to say that he is absolutely in play for a starting spot at the World Cup. And look, if this game goes badly for him, if he makes another mistake, there's so few opportunities that maybe that is the end for him and his World Cup chances. So he really did pull it back from the brink, and while I'm not willing to say everything's fine, I think it was, for him, it felt like his stock went up than maybe any other player after this game.
Yeah. Taylor, any key takeaways?
That was for Big Pat? You felt like his stock went up more than anyone else?
For Freese.
Oh, Freese. Okay,
Freese.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm kind of neutral on Big Pat.
Fair.
Okay. Stock ain't moving there. Fair enough. Taylor, key takeaways for you from this game, if any you haven't covered yet at this point.
The Jack example one, I can't remember if he read that one from the Blue Sky takeaways. Number 1, Arfsten is bad. Number 2, wait, maybe he's good. Number 3, he might be bad. That's about where I am with him. I think his attacking output is to be admired. I think against a Guatemala team that we would assume will be more defensive and try to limit space, try to limit opportunity, maybe you want somebody more attacking in there. So I'm guessing we'll see more of his attacking output. Still concerned about what that could mean in terms of leaving space and defensive frailty behind. But, whatever. We'll see if he can improve from there. And I think that's what this performance is largely. It's a 7 to 8 out of 10 for this team. And then I think what we want to see then is the next one be a solid 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10. And you want to see this team just kind of continue to grow. And so I think that is Agyemang maybe only making 5 runs in the wrong direction instead of 7. Maybe it is him putting a shot on frame when he wouldn't have in the past, or just holding up a little bit more solidly or having a better first touch. I think it's about marginal gains, marginal improvements from this point. And I think a number of players have already had those improvements and have me feeling more confident about this group in this competition. But I don't know how many of them truly have me feeling like they're a slam dunk, locked on starter. Chris Richards is probably the one from this group right now. I thought he was once again pretty solid. I thought he was better in the air than we've seen. But even in let me check my notes, it's the 4th minute, we see him read how Costa Rica are going to try to build, step really aggressively, close down 10 or 15 yards, win the ball, and the thing you always want to see in these types of games, win the ball and then get a little bit of the man. So it's never going to be given as a foul, but you're also letting that attacker know, like, you're in for a long night. And I thought Richards did a really good job of that. I thought you could also see him and Ream be visibly frustrated by how slow the U.S. was moving in certain phases of the game. You could see them like on the ball asking people to show faster and asking people to move more quickly. So I still enjoy the Ream-Richards partnership. I thought Tyler Adams, when he's in there, is always going to give you a bit more fight, a bit more spirit. Stu Holden seemed to have been briefed that Adams was going to be the 3rd center back and said that, I think in the 2nd minute, like, Tyler Adams already dropping in between the center backs. That was not happening. That did happen on occasion as the game went on, but it didn't happen nearly as much as I thought it might. But I think that was critical because he was also the midfielder who was man-marking on occasion when Costa Rica would try to build from deep and would step out really aggressively and sometimes was up there with Luna and Agyemang and Tillman just trying to shut down any sort of build opportunity from Costa Rica. So I remain very confident about Tyler Adams, remain pretty confident about Richards and Ream, and I have a lot more appreciation for Matt Freese, for Malik Tillman, and Diego Luna, and even Agyemang. I thought Berhalter was solid. I still think he is probably a good depth option at this point. I have concerns about Freeman and his ball security. I have concerns about Arfsten and his defensive capabilities. And I needed a little bit more from De La Torre, who I thought had some really silky passes, had some really good ideas, but I think was just, once again, too much of a passenger in this game.
Yeah, totally agree. That was where I was going to lead us to, Taylor. I come out of this game again. I don't have an agenda against Luca De La Torre, but it's been a trend throughout this tournament for me. As I just want to see more of him, and I think he's struggling with his role in this team. Where I look at how Ream and Richards want to play those line-breaking passes into midfield, and it felt like in this game, Berhalter, where he is kind of the right-shaded midfielder, he was kind of dropping, when Freeman was getting high and wide, he was dropping in between, sort of like, if you imagine Freeman on the right side, and then Adams would maybe be in the middle, he would drop in between that space to kind of create those angles and get on the ball, whereas De La Torre doesn't seem to do that into the kind of left back spot, and so it just ends up being bypassed in central midfield. And you look at his numbers, and this has been the case in basically every game he's played for the US at this tournament. His numbers are way down compared to Tyler Adams and Sebastian Berhalter and players that you would expect him to be on a par with. And I kind of think De La Torre, his qualities are in the sort of short possession game, and so if he's not offering you a lot in that sense, I'm confused as to what his role is in this team, and maybe you would be better served having someone more defensively adept. Like I think he's I don't know if he's fully fit at the moment, but maybe that is Johnny Cardoso that drops into that role. So he's probably a player in this game and on the whole that I am stocked down on right now.
Well, looking forward to Wednesday. It is, of course, the semi-final against Guatemala in St. Louis. Taylor, you mentioned sort of a desire to see a solid 8 or a solid 9 out of 10 from this team. And I feel like we've got the ingredients for that. With all due respect to Guatemala, we have probably a more favourable opponent than Canada. We have a smaller, tighter stadium in St. Louis, so a better atmosphere. We have demonstrable growth from this team that we've seen so far, which is going to continue into the semi-final. So I feel pretty good about the way things are trending and about Wednesday as well, Taylor. How do you feel?
I do. Right up until Graham reminded me that Johnny Cardoso was in this team, I kind of forgot that Johnny Cardoso was around. I think he's dealing with an ankle injury, so he hasn't been training. I don't think he was in the match day squad, which is why I didn't even consider him going forward. But Graham, if he's back and is able to train, do you start him in the next game against Guatemala, or do you try to go with maybe more solid possession attacking options in the middle with the assumption that there will be much more of the ball for the U.S. against Guatemala?
Yeah, I would bring McGlynn in ahead of Johnny Cardoso, just because I thought there were periods in this match where it was quite clear, and just for set pieces as well. Berhalter in this game actually puts a couple of set pieces right on Chris Richards' head, and there's one in the second half where Keylor Navas actually has pulls off like a really good save. So even when Berhalter, I didn't think this was like his most outstanding game, but it's similar with McGlynn. The two of them give you another way to score goals, and while I accept the weaknesses of Jack McGlynn, particularly as a right winger, I would still probably bring him in against Guatemala, just because that team, that task, that situation is probably going to be relatively similar to the one that the US have just come through, where they're going to want to get into a physical fight, they want to stay compact and organised, and then get bodies forward to support Rubio Rubin when they can. I wrote about Guatemala for the newsletter last week. They're a great story. They're a really interesting underdog. They've got this YouTuber that they use to recruit players. 40 players across the men's and women's team have come through this YouTuber based in Los Angeles. So they're a great story. They're a limited team, though, and I think the US should be thankful that even with Jesse Marsh missing all his top players that definitely answered the phone on the first ring to him before the start of the tournament, he definitely didn't say words to those effects. I still think this is a good opportunity for the US to make a final here.
That's really interesting about Guatemala, Graham, because for longtime listeners, that's right, Rubio Rubin, the once and not future USMNT striker, is starting for Guatemala. So too Aaron Herrera, who played for the U.S. at youth levels. I can't remember if he ever made a January camp or not, but he is playing for them. DC United legend, Aaron Herrera, such as he is. So it's an interesting team, but it's a Guatemala team that have only had the majority of possession once in this tournament so far. That was against Canada. Canada playing a man down for the entire second half and kind of just desperately trying to make things happen. I don't think that was a good indicator of how Guatemala usually would like to play. Generally speaking, they're going to have less of the ball. They're going to kind of defend and counter. They can cause problems, as they have on occasion in this competition. But I think if you look at their loss to Panama in the group stage, Panama now eliminated as well. But in the group stage, it's a 1-0 win for Panama, who have, I want to say, like 70% of possession and create many, many more opportunities. Only get the one goal because that is how solid this Guatemala team can be. So it's not going to be an easy day for the United States unless they make it an easy day, is I guess how I would say it. It's not going to be Trinidad, who are wide open and giving you a ton of time when you're around their goal. It's going to be a team that you have to find a way to beat, and you have to be quick with your possession. You have to be quick with your individual take-ons. You've got to have people who will try stuff, but you've also got to have a team that can function as a unit. So you've got to have different approaches and different looks. I think that's what the U.S. has been building towards. So I think there is potential here for the U.S. to then have an even more elevated game, get the win, and maybe a somewhat comfortable win, I would hope. And then you're in the final, likely against Mexico. We'll see what happens against Honduras. But I think it's good building, it's good foundation, and the U.S., I think, is growing from game to game. So I hope it continues, and I hope we see another solid performance in the semifinal.
Absolutely. Of course, that'll be on Wednesday. We'll be here on the feed after that game to review that one. Onwards we go. Hopefully another dub for Mauricio Pochettino's USMNT. For this one, Taylor Rockwell, thank you very much indeed for your contributions, as always, sir.
Right back at you, my friend.
And thank you, Graham Ruthven.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
Thank you very much, listener, for joining us on this one. We'll be back on the feed very shortly. But for now, bye!